Hello and welcome back to the channel. Heir of Carthage here, or I guess Heir of Malekith in this case. I'm going to be playing the Druki against the wonderful Indie Pride. Again, if you have not seen his channel at Milk and Cookies Total War, you should go check it out. I was lucky enough to get to play some battles with him here. A really fun guy to play battles with. I enjoy it every time I get together with him. And of course, hope him the best. I think his channel's awesome. So we're going to the plains here. Should be an interesting battle. He's going to be playing as the Changeling. The curious thing about the Changeling in multiplayer is just how expensive he is. I think it's 3,500 gold for the base. And now you do get to pick a formless horror, which is basically you go pick a character that you can change into. And I think you get access to like their entire lore of spells. I don't know if you get like all their specials and stuff like that, but it's very expensive to play as the Changeling. And I get that because he can kind of be whatever, but at the same time, it does make it difficult to play with. I'm going to slow it down for just a second because we're going to be into combat here pretty quick. Indy's rocking some Zangors mostly as a main line, which I like the Zangors, and for those of you not familiar with them, basically their powers get ramped up as spells get cast, up to 20%. So the more spells you cast, the stronger these guys get in terms of base weapon damage and armor-piercing weapon damage. Really cool unit. There's going to be some pink horrors, 4 of those in total, so pretty good skirmish line. And we're going to have a couple of cockatrice units. He's got one grounded here, no doubt, to get a really cool screenshot at the beginning of the battle. I like the cockatrice. It's quite deadly. It's a little bit squishy in terms of armor, but does that terror and is really a pretty solid unit at knocking out some chaff and giving you mobility as Tzeentch. And it also makes their air force that much stronger, and it was already pretty strong. There are some Forsaken, too. Out working on the flanks, so it should be interesting. Now, my army, I decided not to use foot skirmishers because I figured I don't really want to stand off and shoot against Tzeentch as the Druki. Yes, the Druki can stand off quite good, but it is just kind of hard to outshoot Tzeentch whenever they have that barrier and so many flying units that can harass you. So I decided to go with mobile skirmishers in the form of Dark Riders to make it a little more difficult for them to get after me. Otherwise, I'm going to try and bury Indian infantry, and so I've got 8 units of infantry, 4 bleak swords, 4 dread spears, and then I have put the meat of my army into 2 war hydras to kind of be a hit point tank and also a damage dealer. War hydras heal, and they also deal nice damage to infantry, armor-piercing damage in general. It's actually not directed straight towards infantry, and then I got a couple of harpies to be able to move around, and with the manticore as well. This gives me a little mobility and allows me to counter some of that air force that Tzeentch can potentially bring, or at least have something to contend with it. And then I brought Malekith here on a cold one, rather than his dragon, to make him a bit of a smaller target, but to still give him some nice mobility and damage capability. And the only spell I brought with him is Chill Wind. I just didn't want to spend a ton of money on magic, and he's a pretty good melee character, so I figured it would give me a little bit of magic, but mostly focus on his melee. So here we go. We're going to get things underway. My plan when I first got a look at Indy's army, so I was starting off, doing a little bit of scouting. I got a feel for what he has. He doesn't have a ton of melee, so my thought was, okay, well, I feel like my best bet is probably going to be to just rush at him, do everything I can to pin down and kill his pink horrors, and if I can get rid of him, he probably won't have enough melee to finish the job. And in the meantime, I was going to harass his flank units with these crossbows in an attempt to try and just keep attention elsewhere to make it a little easier for me to close the distance. So to start things out, I wanted to try and use the breath attacks on my hydras. It's hard to use them once the battle gets rolling because you have to remove the unit from combat before you can use it again. But I figured it would be good, and sure enough, I did get the breath attack. Or actually, I have not done the breath attacks yet. I'm going to try to here. But Indy's going ahead and coming towards me because I'm harassing him, and he's kind of pushing over here. His formless horror was Nakari, and this is going to give him really good speed and very deadly melee capabilities. Nakari is very tough in melee. A squishy unit, as I'm sure that Slaanesh just kind of likes to be squishy and enjoys squishy and all the stuff at the same time, but decided to kind of chase Nakari off a little bit there. And also kind of chase that cockatrice off. I'm going to use my War Hydras to get in here and slow the approach. I got absolutely smacked with the lash of Slaanesh there. And then here comes the fire from the Exalted Pinks back here. And there's some standard pinks, I believe, on the other side. So I've got Nakari. Actually, he landed his cockatrice here, which is pretty smart because then Nakari can support against these units, and Nakari will absolutely shred those units. And he's actually used this blob as an opportunity to attack me, but at the same time, his Zangors are now buried in bleak swords, and then I'm starting to get some distraction units back into place here on top of his exalted pinks, and now I'm pushing the other flank. And I've also got Malekiths on standby. I didn't want to just dive Malekith straight into this. You can see I'm letting my War Hydra tank, my Manticore tank a little, and now I'm going to bring Malekith up here and start to pose a little bit more of a threat. But you can see that the Zangors are struggling to cut through all this infantry despite being superior to any one unit there. So Nakari's going to fall back, was taking a little bit of damage to the Hydra, and I've got my other Hydra moving forward. So again, I'm going to kind of try and keep the pressure on here. And I'm now pressuring these pink horrors, and I've got my crossbows pressuring them as well. So this is going pretty good so far. It's certainly not a battle where I'm taking no damage, but ultimately my strategy for a numbers game appears viable still, at least at the moment. We will see whether it stays that way. So I'm going to crush this Forsaken a little with my leaders, though. I need to keep moving, so you're going to see me push a spear this direction. I've got another Dread Spear here that we're going to start pushing forward here momentarily. Just kind of keep the pressure on. So, by the way, when I'm playing this battle, I'm kind of watching the bottom of my screen. You can't see it here because the unit cards aren't here, but I'm watching the bottom of my screen and just kind of keeping an eye out for units that aren't moving, that don't have engagement orders, and using that to try and help drive my micro. I'm not great from a micromanagement standpoint, but that does help a lot when you're able to use that bar down there to just kind of keep an eye on notices quick, and then of course you can double click the unit cards to get to that unit quickly, see where they're at, and give them an order if needed. Now my crossbows are going to push in over here and continue to look for targets. Again, looking pretty good. The disruption factor is very high for me, and my Hydras are tanking a ton of damage, and quite frankly, he does have to focus on my Hydras. But at the same time, they also heal and last a long time in combat. And that's why I brought them, because they wouldn't be particularly easy to kill in many circumstances. And so right now, they're doing beautifully what I need them to do. And I'm being very cautious with Malekith because he can't heal, and Nakari is very powerful. So I am trying to give Malekith some respect here. I do have more units. You can see I'm going to start pushing those forward as I notice that they are inactive. From having won their other fight. I'm putting shots in here on some of the cockatrice units, and again, just trying to keep my Hydras where they can continue to heal. They haven't gotten anywhere near their cap yet, but they have healed off a lot, and so you can see that Tzeentch is kind of being forced to fall back. I'm going to use my Chill Wind there to continue to knock the barrier off of those units, and not let them get their barriers back, and chase them with Malekith. I have to be careful. If I blob too much, there's a chance that Nakari could chain route me. And also he's got that Lash of Slaanesh, which can cause some pretty good damage. I think there's also Slicing Shards available to him as well, so blobbing would be a bad idea. I am going to do it in some spots, but yeah, I do have to be careful about it. So Malekith's coming up here to start fighting Nakari a little. I do have Dread Spears to support this fight, so I'm feeling a little more comfortable. Otherwise, Malekith was out on an island there against two Cockatrice units and Nakari, but again, Chill Wind here, continuing to come in, help me keep those barriers down and keep the pressure on. I've kind of got Indy backed up against the wall here. You can see, though, the balance of power is still fairly close, even though I outnumber him by over 2 to 1. But it's because he has some units that are much higher quality. And you can see Nakari very dangerous here. Malekith is no pushover, and he's getting pummeled by Nakari at the moment, so I can't let that go on forever either. Look at these guys healing, man. They just continue to throw hit points on. Comes a big bombardment headed my way, by the way. I do see it, and I start to pull away from it to try and minimize the damage there. Big Tzeentch bombardment. And I do manage to avoid a lot of that damage, not all of it. That's why I was saying I gotta be careful not to get, too blobbed up. Unfortunately for me, the Dark Rider repeater crossbows cannot fire in a 360-degree arc, but I can still kite these units. There's only 2. And despite their speed, they can't quite catch me, and I can give them a lot of fits. Malekith, you can see there, is a little bit worse for wear after that melee. It was rough on him. But this gives me an opportunity to get back here and try and finish off these pink horrors, and exalted pink horrors. I've still got a lot of Dread Spears and Bleak Swords here that just aren't needed at the moment. But again, I have to be careful not to overcommit to any one spot. So I'm able to try and keep my crossbows managed. I'm not using automatic what do you call it, auto skirmish. I'm having to do it manually, so it's a lot for me because, again, you know, a ton of micromanagement is not my forte in a battle. That's why I said I got to watch out for that magic there. Fortunately for me, that was not an overcast. But I'm trying to get rid of these pinks over here with the War Hydra. Of course, you can't terror route demons, so it's not quite as easy sometimes as you want it to be. But look at this cockatrice now coming down. I don't have a leader over here. I am definitely at risk of potentially suffering a terror route. And then look at my positioning right here next to the line. Look at that big whip there. The attack of the cockatrice, and there it is, a terror route right next to the line. So I told you that I had to watch out for that. I didn't take my own advice, even though I was thinking of it during the battle. And that all of a sudden had me scared here. I was like, oh crap, am I going to get my army terror routed? So I tried to split up a little and go ahead and, you know, just be careful, keep my distance, use my repeater crossbows, get some of their damage in here. Let my War Hydra kind of keep tanking here. It's doing a really excellent job. These cockatrice units are starting to get low on health. It's good for me. So I think if we just kind of keep up the pressure here, we can do it. You see Malekith here coming after that cockatrice. We still haven't landed a hit on it yet, though. Should be able to land one soon. See, its barrier. Yeah, there it goes. We finally hit it because I knocked its barrier off. This War Hydra is going to get pushed off the map here by Nakari, so good job by Indy Pride making sure that unit doesn't come back and make a difference. I do have a Manticore back here. I don't think I noticed the Manticore until late because I was really busy with my crossbows trying to get rid of these guys, but I will get the Manticore back over. But fortunately for me, I don't desperately need it at the moment. I took control of the battle right here as I was able to rout those cockatrice units, and then I started to pull back my crossbows, and now I can focus whatever ammunition I have left on Nakari, who doesn't really have any armor, and so this is going to be very, very bad for him. Here at the end, I didn't bring all these units in on Nakari because I had just seen what had happened, so I kind of intentionally left them away and spread out because there was just no need for me to blob anything in his direction. I could go after him with the Hydra, which would not suffer a terror route, so it's just something I decided to do. I'm also escorting these cockatrice units off the battlefield. He does have a unit of Zangors coming back from across the map, but it's not likely to make it here before we send Nakari packing. So I do go ahead and decide to commit here because Nakari is alone and very low. You can see I finally brought my Manticore up, but don't need it at this point. So it is going to be a success in this case for my Druchii army against the armies of the Changeling, led by Indy Pride, but it was not necessarily an easy battle there. The Changeling going over to Nakari picked up almost 3,000 gold value. It does cost at least 35, but still, I mean, that darn near paid, which it needs to because it's so expensive. I do think the Changeling's probably a little bit overpriced in multiplayer. Don't get me wrong, a good character and capable of a lot of damage, but a lot of things for Tzeentch are pretty expensive. I'm just not sure, but I don't know exactly how the whole balance plays out. But the cockatrice units here were interesting. They were a lot harder to defeat than I thought they might be because of their low armor. They didn't necessarily get a ton of value here, but those were tricky units, and you all saw me having to fight against them the entire battle. And despite getting outnumbered pretty heavily, those Zangors still managed to put up a decent number of kills. So it was an interesting battle. Even though limited on numbers, Tzeentch put up a good fight there. And then I was able to use my numbers. And you can see here that both of my War Hydras definitely paid some pretty good dividends there. Malekith, not so much. The crossbows did pretty okay for me. Like, I mean, nothing amazing, but, you know, pretty solid. And then, again, these Dread Spears and Bleak Swords don't cost much, and so all of them ended up doing just fine in terms of the value. It was actually my Harpies that were probably the least valuable units here in terms of what they ended up doing. But thanks to Indy Pride for the game. I will see you all soon with some more Total War Warhammer 3 action. See you then.